In this video, we're going to set up the lights and rendering for our finished interior tutorial. In my perspective view, I'll hit 4 on the keyboard, holding down the space bar. In the hotbox, I'll go to Create Lights, and I'll choose Spotlight. And the spotlight will appear at the bottom 000 in your viewport. If you happen to have a view in which you've got 6 on your keyboard selected, you won't be able to see it, so 4 will help you find it. I'll hit W on the keyboard, and I'm going to move it above the room, if it were a ceiling light. Now I want the light to point down towards my table. With lights, as well as cameras, when I hit T on the keyboard, I have 2 icons for the light icon itself. The cone is the source, and the blue box is the target. I'm going to drag it down to my table and place it over the bowl of fruit. If I wanted to, I could hold V down on the keyboard, and when I do, the icon on the target area turns from a square to a circle. That will allow me to snap it to points in my model. So if I were to look closely now, it's right on my bowl. Now I'm going to go to the attributes for the light, and in the attributes I'll set the default intensity to about 20. Hitting return, I'll change the penumbra angle to 10. Now I'm going to go to where it says Arnold. Clicking it open, I'll change the exposure to 3.25. Now I'm ready to roughly preview the lighting effect using the Arnold render window. The Arnold tab appears at the top of the user interface directly next to the word Help. I'll click on Arnold and choose Open Arnold Render View. In the Render View, I'll click on the red triangle in the upper right hand corner, and it will preview my light that I introduced. When we introduce lights, we start with a very general setting like this. I want this to light more of the room, so I'll go to the light attributes, and I'll use the Arnold window to preview the change. I'm going to make the cone angle larger, and I'm going to reduce the intensity. I'd like this to be kind of an ambient light so that I can have other lights that will highlight areas of my composition. Now I'm going to put a light on my lamp. Holding down the space bar to get the hot box, I'll go to Create, Lights, Spotlight. And because I had been editing my previous light, I see the 2 icons. I'm going to hit W on the keyboard so I can move both target and source together to the location I'd like them to be. In my top view, I'll drag the light icon over my lamp. I'll now go to an orthographic view to line it up above the lamp. Now I want the target to be pointed down towards the bottom of the base. Once again, I'll hit T. I'll drag the target down to the base of the plant pot. I'm going to go to my front orthographic view as well, just to make sure that it's where I'd like it to be. Now I'm going to pull the light cone icon, the source, up above the bulb. If I were to put it down inside the bulb, it would basically hide the light. So I'll put it just near the top of the shade itself. Now I'll hit F on the keyboard in my perspective view to see what I have. Once again, I'm going to use the default sets, making the intensity 20. Hitting return. Penumbra angle again will be 10 to soften how the light falls. And then I'm going to go down to Arnold, and I'm going to change the exposure to 3.25. I'm going to go to Arnold, open Arnold Render View, and I'll click on the red triangle. And now I can see that I have a light concentrating in the corner of the room. I'm going to adjust it so it's not as bright. With the light icon selected, I'll go to the attributes and I'll drop the intensity to 10. I'll go back to Arnold, open Arnold view, and then I'll click on the red triangle. I'll now open my Arnold render view and click on the red triangle. And if I wanted to, I can kind of tweak this on the fly, and Arnold will update for me. Now, sometimes Arnold just disconnects and stops previewing the changes as you do them virtually. All you would need to do is close out the render window and go back and access it again and re-render. And it happens often enough once we start to introduce a lot of lights. Now I'm going to set a specific light over the table and the bowl of fruit and the wine glass. Now, rather than go and create a whole new light, I can select one of the lights that's already in my composition with some sort of a default setting that will show light when I render. Selecting the light that's at the top of the ceiling, I'll hit W to make sure I'm not in the editing mode, and I'll hit Command D to duplicate. I'll drag it down to the table. And now I'm going to change the angle of it and the cone size. So I'll drop the cone down considerably, maybe back to 40, and I'm going to hit T on the keyboard, and I'll bring the target up to the wine bottle. Holding V, I'll snap it to it, and if I were to take a look more closely, the light is pointing directly at the wine bottle. Now I want to take a shot from this angle of the table across to that angle, kind of a diagonal. I'll drag the light source, the cone shape, over to the other side of the table. And saving, I'll now go open the Arnold render window. And now I can see the lighting on the top of my table. I want to reduce the circumference of the light and make it a little bit more concentrated in the area around the wine bottle and the bowl of fruit. I'm going to move the cup a bit so the composition is a little bit more acceptable. And I'll select the light, and then in the attributes, I'll reduce the cone size, and maybe I'll just bring up the brightness a bit. I'm going to reduce the amount of shadow. Under the Shadow tab, I'll drag the shadow slider to the right and make the shadow more translucent. Now I'm going to put a light against the poster on the wall. I'll select the light that's over the table, and I'll hit W to get out of the editing mode, and I'll hit Command D to duplicate. In my top view, I'll put it in the general area I'd like to have it. Hitting F on the keyboard to zoom in. I'll hit T on the keyboard to get the editing hot point, target area. Zooming in close to the poster, holding down the V, I can snap it to the poster itself. Now I can start to refine how I want the light to shine against that surface. Going to Arnold, clicking on the Open Arnold Render View, clicking on the triangle. I'll now go to my attributes, and I'll start to refine it. I think I might want the cone angle to be a little larger. And I want it to be a little higher on the poster itself, so I'm going to do that in the viewport. And then I'll reduce the intensity. This stuff becomes very subjective at this point. If I want to, I could play with the drop off a little bit. I'm going to put one more light over my plant. I'll select the light that's over the lamp, hitting W to get out of the editing mode. Command D to duplicate. I'll drag the light over in the area where the plant is. Make it higher, and I'd like the light angle to fall from this angle against the wall. So once I have it roughly into position, I'll hit T on the keyboard. Holding down V, I'll click on the target icon and snap it to the base of my plant. I'll go to Arnold, open Arnold Render View, and I'll click on the red triangle. I'm going to zoom in on it so I can refine this a bit. So I think I'm going to leave that like that.